Vincent Callahan had been riding for 32 years and had learned to trust his gut. So when his headlight caught a shape moving along the frozen road at 11 o'clock on a February night, and he realized it was a woman in nothing but a thin nightgown, barefoot in the snow, arms wrapped around herself against the 19-degree cold, he hit the brakes so hard he almost laid down his Indian chief. What happened next? The jacket offered without question. The call to Sister Catherine at the shelter on Maple Street. The 3 years of healing and rebuilding and becoming family prove that sometimes the most important decision a person makes is the one they do not even think about. The instinct that says you cannot just drive past someone who is freezing and alone. The temperature had dropped to 19 degrees by the time Vincent Callahan saw her. He was 56 years old, a retired union electrician who had spent 32 years wiring buildings in every corner of the state before his knees finally gave out and forced him into a retirement he had not wanted. The work had been hard on his body, but good for his soul. He had built things that mattered: hospitals, schools, factories that employed thousands. Every time he flipped a light switch in a building he had wired, he felt a quiet pride that never got old. Now, he filled his days with long rides on his Indian chief, a bike he had rebuilt himself over 2 winters in his garage, while Maria brought him coffee and told him he was obsessed. She was right, of course. She usually was. They had been married for 31 years now, raised 2 kids who had grown into adults he was proud of, and settled into the kind of comfortable rhythm that came from decades of learning how to love someone through all their rough edges. Maria said he needed hobbies, or he would drive her crazy, and she was probably right about that too. So he rode. He volunteered with the veterans group at St. Michael's, helping guys who had come back from wars with pieces of themselves missing, visible and invisible. He played cards with Ray on Thursday nights and fixed things around the house that did not really need fixing, just to keep his hands busy. Tonight he was coming back from Ray's place on the other side of the county, where they had spent the evening playing poker and complaining about their joints and talking about the old days when their bodies did what they told them to do. It was late, almost 11, and the roads were empty the way they always got in February, when the cold kept sensible people inside. Vincent was not sensible. He had thermal gear and heated grips, and a stubborn streak that would not let a little weather tell him what to do. The snow had started falling about an hour ago, light and steady, coating the road with a thin white layer that his tires cut through easily enough. He was taking the back way home, the route that wound through the old mill district where the factories had closed 20 years ago, and the houses had been sliding into disrepair ever since. Not the safest neighborhood, but Vincent had grown up around here. He knew every pothole and every shortcut. His father had worked in one of those mills before they shut down, had come home every night smelling like machine oil and sweat, had taught Vincent that a man's worth was measured by what he built with his hands. He almost did not see her. She was just a shape at first, a smudge of movement at the edge of his headlight beam. He thought it was an animal maybe, a dog that had gotten loose, and he slowed down instinctively. But then the shape resolved into something else, something that made his heart stutter in his chest. A woman, walking along the side of the road in the snow, wearing nothing but a thin nightgown, arms wrapped around herself, head down against the wind. Barefoot. Vincent hit the brakes so hard, he almost laid the bike down. He pulled onto the shoulder and killed the engine, swinging off the bike, before it had fully stopped rocking. The woman had frozen when she heard him, her head snapping up, her whole body going rigid with fear. In the glow of his headlight, he could see her face clearly now. Young, maybe mid-20s, with dark hair plastered to her forehead by snow and tears. Her lips were blue. Her feet, bare against the frozen ground, were already turning an ugly shade of red that would become black if she stayed out here much longer. But what stopped him cold was her eyes. The same look he had seen on soldiers coming back from places no one should have to go. The look of someone who had been through something terrible and was still running from it even now. Vincent had seen that look before. During his years as an electrician, he had worked plenty of jobs in bad neighborhoods, had witnessed things that stayed with him. He had once found a teenager hiding in a basement he was rewiring, a kid who had run away from a group home and was too scared to go back. He had sat with that kid for an hour, talking about nothing, before convincing him to let Vincent call someone who could help. He had learned something that day. Sometimes the most important thing you could do was just be present. Just show someone they were not invisible. He held up his hands now, palms out, showing the woman he was not a threat. He kept his voice low and calm, the same voice he had used with his kids when they were small and scared of thunderstorms. He told her his name was Vincent, and he was not going to hurt her. He said he was just an old man on a motorcycle who had seen her walking and wanted to make sure she was okay. He asked if she needed help. She did not respond, did not move, did not acknowledge that he existed. He tried again. He said it was 19 degrees out, and she was going to freeze to death if she stayed out here. He said he had a phone, and he could call someone for her, anyone she wanted, or he could just give her his jacket and sit with her until she figured out what she needed. Still nothing. But she had not run, had not screamed, had not done anything except stand there shaking. And Vincent took that as a sign that maybe, just maybe, she was willing to let someone help. He unzipped his riding jacket and shrugged it off. The cold hit him immediately, biting through his thermal shirt, but he did not care. He walked toward her slowly, holding the jacket out in front of him like an offering. She flinched when he got close, actually recoiled, like she expected him to hit her, and that flinch told Vincent everything he needed to know about why she was out here barefoot in the snow at 11 o'clock at night. He stopped, set the jacket down on the ground between them, stepped back. He told her the jacket was hers if she wanted it. He said he was going to call for help now, but he was not going to leave her. He was going to stay right here until someone came, and then he was going to make sure she got somewhere safe. She looked at the jacket, looked at him, looked back at the jacket, then she moved. Hit subscribe if you believe that one person paying attention can change everything. Comment where you're watching from, and share this with someone who needs to know that help can come from the most unexpected places. Her name was Elena. She told him that while she huddled in his jacket, her bare feet tucked under her on the frozen ground, her whole body shaking so hard she could barely get the words out. She was 27 years old. She had grown up in a small town 4 hours south of here, the daughter of a mechanic and a school teacher who had loved her fiercely and raised her to believe she deserved good things. She had gone to college, studied accounting, gotten a job at a firm in the city. She had been building a life, brick by brick, the way her parents had taught her. Then she met Daniel. He had seemed perfect at first, charming, attentive, the kind of man who remembered the little things and made her feel like the center of the universe. He brought her flowers for no reason. He texted her good morning every day and good night every night. He listened when she talked and remembered what she said. Her friends were jealous. Her mother was thrilled. Everyone said she had found a good one. They got married after a year and a half of dating. A small ceremony, just family and close friends, followed by a honeymoon in Mexico, where Daniel had surprised her with a sunset boat ride and told her she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. She did not know then that the sunset boat ride would be the last purely happy memory she would have. The changes started small, so small She did not even notice them at first. He did not like one of her friends, thought she was a bad influence, and Elena agreed to see her less often. He thought her skirts were too short for the office, and Elena started wearing longer ones. He wanted to know where she was at all times, and Elena told herself it was because he loved her so much he could not stand to be away from her. By the time she realized what was happening, she was already trapped. He had isolated her from everyone she cared about. Her friends had drifted away because she kept canceling plans. Her parents barely heard from her anymore because Daniel always seemed to need her when she tried to call them. She had quit her job because he said they did not need the money and he wanted her home. She had no income, no independence, no one to turn to. And then the hitting started. She did not give Vincent the details. She did not have to. The bruises darkening on her arms and the cut above her eye told enough of the story. Tonight had been the worst it had ever gotten. She had made the wrong dinner, or folded his shirts the wrong way, or breathed too loudly. She could not even remember what had set him off. It did not matter anymore. What mattered was that she had looked at him standing over her, his fist raised, his face twisted with rage, and she had known with absolute certainty that if she did not leave right now, she would not survive to see another morning. She had waited until he passed out. Then she had run. No time to grab shoes or a coat or her phone or anything else. Just out the door and down the street and keep going. Keep going. Keep going until she could not feel her feet anymore. And the cold was so deep inside her that she wondered if she would ever be warm again. She did not know where she was going. Did not have anywhere to go. Her family was 3 states away, and she had not talked to them in 2 years because he had made sure of that. Her friends had all drifted away one by one because he had made sure of that too. She was alone in the world, freezing to death on the side of a road in the middle of nowhere. And she had honestly been starting to think that maybe freezing was not the worst way to go. And then a motorcycle had appeared out of the snow, and a stranger had given her his jacket. And now, here she was, sitting on frozen ground, telling her story to a man she had never met, who was standing in the cold in his shirt sleeves, because he had refused to let her freeze. She did not understand any of it, did not understand why he had stopped, why he cared, why he was looking at her with something in his eyes that she had not seen in a very long time. Kindness, simple human kindness, offered without expectation or agenda. It broke something open in her chest, and she started crying for real. Not just the tears that the cold had squeezed out of her, but deep wrenching sobs that shook her whole body and would not stop. Vincent did not try to make her stop, did not tell her it was going to be okay, or offer empty reassurances. He just stood there in the cold, giving her space to fall apart, his phone already out, and calling the one person he knew could help. Her name was Sister Catherine, and she ran the shelter on Maple Street. Vincent had known her for 15 years, ever since he had started volunteering with the veterans group at St. Michael's. She was 73 years old, barely 5 feet tall, and tougher than anyone Vincent had ever met. She had been a nun for 52 years, had spent time in Central America during the Civil Wars, had seen things that would break most people. Instead of breaking, she had come home and dedicated her life to helping others survive their own wars. She had founded the shelter 40 years ago, when domestic violence was still something people did not talk about, when women who left their husbands were seen as troublemakers rather than survivors. She had fought for funding, fought for recognition, fought against a system that seemed designed to keep victims trapped. And she had won, one battle at a time, building a refuge that had saved thousands of lives. Half the cops in town knew her by name. The other half knew her by reputation. When Sister Catherine called, people answered. She answered on the second ring, her voice sharp and alert despite the hour. Vincent explained the situation. A woman, mid-20s, fleeing a bad situation, barefoot in the snow, in rough shape. He gave his location, the intersection at the Old Mill District, and asked if she could send someone. Sister Catherine said she would do better than that. She was coming herself. 20 minutes later, a battered church van pulled up beside Vincent's motorcycle. Sister Catherine climbed out of the driver's seat, wrapped in a heavy coat, her white hair tucked under a knit cap. She took one look at Elena huddled on the ground in Vincent's jacket, and her face went hard, in a way that spoke of decades spent cleaning up the damage that certain people could do. She did not waste words, just walked over to Elena, crouched down to her level, and introduced herself in a voice that was firm but gentle. She said her name was Catherine, and she ran a shelter for women in crisis. She said Elena was safe now, and no one was going to hurt her again tonight. She asked if Elena would come with her somewhere warm, where she could get medical attention, and a bed, and some time to figure out her next steps. Elena looked at Vincent. He nodded. She looked back at Sister Catherine, and then she reached out and let the old nun help her to her feet. Getting Elena into the van took some doing. Her feet had gone numb, and she could barely walk. Vincent ended up carrying her the last few yards, her weight almost nothing in his arms, her body so thin he could feel her ribs through his jacket. He settled her in the back seat, where Sister Catherine had already spread out blankets. The nun was on her phone, talking to someone at the shelter, giving orders in a tone that left no room for argument. Hot water bottles, clean clothes, a bed ready, the nurse on call. Before she drove away, Sister Catherine pulled Vincent aside. She thanked him, not effusively, not with a lot of words, just a simple acknowledgement that what he had done tonight mattered. Most people, she said, would have kept driving. Most people would have told themselves it was not their business, not their problem, not their responsibility. Most people would have gone home and tried to forget what they saw. He did not do that, she said. He stopped. And because he stopped, that young woman was going to survive the night. Maybe survive the rest of her life if she got the help she needed. Vincent did not know what to say to that. He had not thought about it in those terms. Had not thought about anything except the fact that there was a woman barefoot in the snow, and he could not just drive past. Sister Catherine smiled. That was exactly why he had stopped, she said. Because he was the kind of person who could not just drive past. And the world needed more people like that. She gave him a card with the shelter's number on it. Told him to call tomorrow, check on the girl, come by if he wanted. Then she climbed back into the van and drove away. Tail lights disappearing into the snow. Vincent stood there for a long time, watching them go. Then he got back on his bike, started the engine, and rode home through the cold. He did not sleep that night, just sat in his kitchen drinking coffee, thinking about Elena's eyes, and the way she had flinched when he got close. Maria found him there at 6 a.m, still in his riding clothes, still staring at nothing. She sat down across from him and took his hand. She did not ask what was wrong. After 31 years, she did not need to. She just waited until he was ready to tell her. He told her everything. About the woman in the snow, about the flinch, about the jacket and the phone call and the nun in the church van, about the feeling in his gut that he had been in the right place, at the right time, for a reason he did not fully understand. Maria listened without interrupting. When he was done, she squeezed his hand and told him she was proud of him. Then she got up and made him breakfast, because that was what she did when words were not enough. If you're enjoying this story, hit that hype button right now. It's free, takes a second, and helps this video reach more people who need to see it. Now back to the story. He called the shelter the next morning. Sister Catherine answered, sounding like she had been up all night, which she probably had. She told him Elena was stable. The nurse had treated her for mild frostbite on her feet and some other injuries that Catherine did not specify. She was sleeping now, warm and safe, and she would probably be at the shelter for a while until they could figure out her next steps. Vincent asked if there was anything he could do, anything at all. Catherine was quiet for a moment. Then she said there was always something that could be done. The shelter ran on donations and volunteer hours and the goodwill of people who gave a damn. If he wanted to help, there was no shortage of ways. Vincent drove over that afternoon. The shelter was a converted Victorian house on a quiet street, 3 stories of faded elegance that had been repurposed into something essential. The paint was peeling and the gutters needed work, but there were flower boxes in the windows and a welcome mat at the door and a feeling of warmth that had nothing to do with the heating system. Vincent had driven past it 100 times over the years, but had never been inside. Now, standing on the porch, he felt like he was crossing into a different world. Sister Catherine met him at the door and gave him a tour. The first floor held the common areas. A big kitchen where meals were prepared 3 times a day by volunteers and residents working together. A living room with worn but comfortable furniture, where women sat talking or reading or just staring out the window. An office where staff handled the constant paperwork of keeping the place running. The upper floors were bedrooms, shared and private, currently housing 17 women and 12 children who had fled situations too dangerous to stay in. Some had been here for weeks, some for months. A few had been here before, had left, had tried to go back to their old lives, and had ended up here again when those lives proved just as dangerous as they remembered. Catherine did not judge them for that. Neither did Vincent. He understood, in a way he could not quite articulate, that leaving was not a single decision, but a process. A series of attempts that might fail before one finally succeeded. She did not introduce him to any of the residents. Privacy was paramount here, she explained. These women had come from places where their lives depended on not being found. The shelter's location was kept confidential, its address unlisted, its existence known only to those who needed to know. But she did take him to see Elena. She was in one of the private rooms on the 2nd floor, propped up in bed with bandages on her feet and a bruise on her cheek that looked even worse in daylight. But her eyes were different than they had been last night. Still haunted, still scared, but with something else in them now. Something that looked like the faintest flicker of hope. She recognized him immediately. Her face changed when he walked in, some of the tension draining out of her shoulders. Vincent stayed for an hour. He did not push her to talk, did not ask questions about what had happened or what she was going to do next. He just sat in the chair by the window and let her lead the conversation wherever she wanted it to go. She talked about small things at first, the soup she had eaten for breakfast, chicken noodle from a can. But it had tasted like the best meal of her life. The nurse who had been kind, who had bandaged her feet without asking how they got that way. The way the snow looked through the window, peaceful instead of threatening, now that she was watching it from somewhere warm. Then, slowly, she started talking about bigger things. She talked about her parents, how much she missed them, how ashamed she was of the way she had cut them off. She had not talked to her mother in almost 2 years, had not told them about Daniel, about what he had become, about what he had done to her. She did not know how to explain it, did not know if they would even believe her. Vincent told her about his own kids, his son, Michael, who was 30 now and worked as a physical therapist in Seattle, his daughter Grace, who was 27, the same age as Elena, and taught 3rd grade in a town 2 hours north. He told her about the mistakes he had made as a father, The times he had worked too much and been home too little. The arguments that had seemed so important at the time and meant nothing now. He told her that parents forgave their children for almost everything. That the love between a parent and child could survive distances and silences and years of not understanding each other. That if she called her mother tomorrow, her mother would cry with relief and ask her to come home. Elena started crying again, but this time it was different. This time it felt like something breaking free instead of something breaking down. Vincent became a regular at the shelter. He started coming by once a week, then twice, then almost every day. There was always something that needed doing. Light bulbs to change, doorknobs to fix, that one radiator on the third floor that kept making a noise like a dying cat. His electrician's skills came in handy more often than he expected. The shelter's wiring was ancient, held together by prayers and duct tape, and Vincent spent more hours than he could count bringing it up to something resembling code. He rewired the kitchen first, because that was where the most dangerous problems were. An outlet that sparked every time someone plugged in the toaster. A light fixture that flickered ominously whenever the refrigerator kicked on. A junction box in the basement that made him actually gasp when he opened it and saw the tangle of wires inside. Sister Catherine watched him work one afternoon, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. She asked him why he kept coming back. It was not an accusation, just a genuine question. Most volunteers showed up for a few weeks and then drifted away, their good intentions overwhelmed by the weight of what they saw here. Vincent thought about it, thought about all the times in his life when he had driven past things, looked away from things, told himself that someone else would handle it, thought about all the people who were still suffering because no one had stopped for them. He told her he came back because it felt right, because the work mattered, because every time he fixed something broken, every time he made this place a little safer and a little more functional, he felt like he was pushing back against all the things in the world that broke people down. Catherine nodded. She told him he was welcome to stay as long as he wanted. Then she walked away, and Vincent went back to wrestling with the junction box. The repair work was just an excuse, of course. The real reason he kept coming back was the people. He got to know the other volunteers, retired teachers and nurses, young people doing service hours, a rotating cast of good-hearted folks who showed up because they wanted to help. He got to know the staff, overworked and underpaid, but fiercely dedicated to the women and children in their care. And slowly, carefully, respecting boundaries he was still learning to understand, he got to know some of the residents. There was Patricia, a grandmother in her 60s, who had fled a husband she had been married to for 40 years. He had never hit her, she said, never laid a hand on her. But the things he said, the way he made her feel, had worn her down until she barely recognized herself anymore. She had left 3 weeks ago and was still figuring out how to be a person again. There was Deshauna, a young mother with 2 kids under 5, who had grown up in foster care and fallen for the first man who said he loved her. He had said it so convincingly that she had believed him even when his actions told a different story. She was 22 years old and had already lived through more pain than most people faced in a lifetime. There was Maria Elena, a 50-year-old immigrant who spoke little English but communicated everything she needed to through her eyes and her hands, and the meals she cooked for the other residents, recipes from her homeland that filled the shelter with smells that made everyone feel a little less lost. Their stories were all different and all the same. Different circumstances, different details, different paths that had led them here. But underneath, the same thread ran through all of them. People who had been hurt by people who were supposed to love them. People who had been told they were worthless until they started to believe it. People who had found the courage to run, even when running seemed impossible. Vincent did not try to fix them. did not offer advice or solutions, just showed up day after day and did whatever needed doing. Fixed the things that were broken, listened when someone needed to talk, played with the kids in the common room, teaching them card tricks and letting them win at checkers. And he kept an eye on Elena. If Bike Diaries has become part of your week, consider joining the channel membership. Just a couple bucks a month keeps these stories coming. Links below. And hit that hype button if you haven't already. Now back to the story. Her recovery was not linear. There were good days and bad days. Days when she seemed almost like a normal person, laughing at something someone said, eating a full meal, talking about the future like it was something she might actually have. And days when she could not get out of bed, when the weight of everything she had been through pressed down on her until she could barely breathe. The therapist helped. Sister Catherine had connected Elena with a woman named Dr. Okafor, a psychologist who specialized in trauma and worked with the shelter's residents at reduced rates. She came every Tuesday and Thursday, and Elena met with her for an hour each time, working through the tangled mess of guilt and shame and fear that Daniel had planted in her head. It was not easy. Dr. Okafor did not promise easy. She promised hard work and slow progress, and setbacks that would feel like the end of the world, but were actually just part of the journey. She promised that healing was possible, even if it did not feel possible right now. Elena believed her. Some days. Other days, she was not sure she believed anything. Vincent learned to take both in stride. He had seen enough in his years to know that healing was not a straight line. You did not just decide to be okay and then be okay. You climbed and you fell and you climbed again, and the only thing that mattered was that you kept climbing. The shelter helped her with the practical things too. They helped her file for a protective order, helped her navigate the legal system that seemed designed to make everything harder than it needed to be, helped her find a lawyer named Sandra Chen, who would work pro bono and who had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless when it came to protecting her clients. Sandra came to the shelter to meet with Elena, and Vincent happened to be there that day, fixing a door that had come off its hinges. He overheard pieces of the conversation. Not intentionally, but the walls were thin and Sandra's voice carried. She was explaining the process, the paperwork, the court dates, the hearings, the importance of documenting everything, the likelihood that Daniel would contest the order, would hire his own lawyer, would do everything he could to make Elena's life difficult. Elena's voice was quiet, scared but steady. She asked what would happen if he found her, if he showed up here at the shelter and tried to take her back. Sandra's voice was steel. She said that was not going to happen. She said the shelter had security protocols, had relationships with local law enforcement, had a network of people who would make sure Elena stayed safe. She said Daniel might try, but he would not succeed. Vincent believed her. Sandra Chen was not the kind of person who made promises she could not keep. The husband did not make it easy. He showed up at the shelter once, drunk and screaming, demanding to see his wife. Vincent was there that day, helping patch a leak in the roof, and he came downstairs to find Sister Catherine facing the man down on the front porch, her tiny frame planted between him and the door, like a wall he could not climb. Daniel was a big man, well over 6 feet, with the kind of build that came from hours at the gym. He towered over Sister Catherine by more than a foot, but she did not move, did not flinch, just stood there looking up at him with an expression that said she had faced down men far more dangerous than him and was not about to start backing down now. Vincent positioned himself at the edge of the porch, visible but not aggressive. He was not a violent man, had not thrown a punch since high school, but he would not let this woman face this alone. The police came and took Daniel away. He came back a week later. sober this time, but no less dangerous. And the police came again. The third time, the judge finally issued an order that put him in jail for 30 days and made it very clear what would happen if he came near the shelter again. Through all of it, Elena got stronger. Not all at once. Not in any way that was obvious from day to day. But looking back over weeks and months, the change was undeniable. She started eating regular meals, started sleeping through the night, started talking to the other residents, forming friendships with women who understood what she had been through, because they had been through it too. She called her mother. That was the hardest thing she had ever done, dialing the number she still knew by heart, listening to it ring, not knowing what she would say when someone answered. Her mother answered on the third ring. There was a moment of silence, and then her mother said her name. Just her name, the way she used to say it when Elena was a little girl. And Elena started crying so hard she could not speak. They talked for 2 hours. Her mother cried too. She said she had known something was wrong, but had not known how to reach her. She said she had been so scared, had prayed every night that her daughter was okay, had almost hired a private investigator to find her. She said, "Come home." She said, "We love you." She said, "Whatever happened, we will get through it together." Elena started talking about what came next. 6 months after the night in the snow, Elena moved out of the shelter. She had found an apartment on the other side of the city, a small one-bedroom in a building with good security, and a landlord who understood her situation. The building manager was a woman named Rosa, who had been through something similar 20 years ago, and who had made it her mission to help other women get back on their feet. Elena had found a job too, entry-level accounting work at a small firm downtown. It did not pay much, but it was a start. Her skills were rusty after 2 years away from the workforce, but they were coming back. And her boss, a woman named Teresa, who had noticed something in Elena's resume that spoke of potential, was patient with her mistakes and generous with her praise. She was rebuilding, piece by piece, the life that had been taken from her. The day she moved out, Vincent helped load her few possessions into a borrowed pickup truck. It did not take long. She had arrived at the shelter with nothing and was leaving with not much more. Some donated clothes, a few books, a second-hand laptop the shelter had given her. But she was also leaving with something that could not be packed in a box. She was leaving with the knowledge that she had survived, that she had been through the worst things she could imagine and come out the other side, that she was stronger than she knew. Maria came with Vincent that day. She had been coming to the shelter for months now, helping in the kitchen, reading to the kids before bed, forming her own relationships with the residents. She had become a kind of surrogate mother to some of them, offering the warmth and acceptance that so many of them had been denied. She hugged Elena at the door of her new apartment, a long embrace that said everything words could not. Before she drove away, Elena hugged Vincent for a long time too. She did not say much, did not need to. The hug said everything. He told her she knew where to find him, told her to call if she needed anything, anytime, day or night. Told her he was proud of her, and he meant it more than he had ever meant anything. She smiled, a real smile, the first one he had ever seen from her that reached all the way to her eyes. Then she got in the truck and drove away toward a future that was hers to build. But the story did not end there. Vincent kept volunteering at the shelter. It had become part of his life now, woven into the fabric of his days, the same way his rides and his card games with Ray had always been. Maria teased him about having a second home, but she was proud of him too. They went together most of the time now, a team, working side by side the way they had for 31 years. And one evening, about a year after the night in the snow, Sister Catherine called him into her office. She had a proposition for him, she said. The shelter was expanding. They had secured funding for a new transitional housing program, apartments where women could live independently but still receive support services. They needed someone to manage the maintenance for the new properties. Someone reliable, handy, and good with people who had been through hard times. She was offering him a job. Vincent laughed at first. He was retired, he said. 60 years old now, his knees shot, his best years behind him. He was not looking for a job. Sister Catherine smiled the way she always did when someone told her something she did not believe. She said she was not looking for someone to run marathons. She was looking for someone who showed up, someone who cared, someone who had already proven on a frozen road in the middle of the night that he was exactly the kind of person she wanted on her team. Vincent went home and talked to Maria about it. They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where he had sat drinking coffee the night he found Elena, and they talked for hours. Maria said she thought he should take it. She said he had been happier these past months than she had seen him in years. She said retirement did not suit him, that he needed to be useful, that this was what he was meant to do. Vincent knew she was right. She usually was. He took the job. 3 years passed. The transitional housing program grew from 4 apartments to 12, then 20. Vincent managed them all, fixing leaky faucets and broken heaters, and anything else that needed attention. But more than that, he was there for the women who lived in them. A steady presence, reliable and kind. Someone who showed up without being asked and stayed without being thanked. He learned their names and their stories and the things that made them laugh. He learned which ones needed space and which ones needed company, which ones wanted to talk and which ones just wanted someone nearby. He became a fixture in their lives, the grandfatherly figure who always had a kind word and a set of tools and time to spare. Maria worked alongside him more often than not. She had become the unofficial coordinator of the support network, connecting residents with services and resources and people who could help. Between the two of them, they had helped more women get back on their feet than they could count. He still rode his Indian chief on the weekends, though he was careful about the cold now. Maria said his blood had thinned in his old age. He said she was probably right. He still played cards with Ray on Thursday nights, still volunteered with the veterans group at church, still lived his life the way he always had, just with an added dimension that had not existed before that night in the snow. And he kept in touch with Elena. She was doing well, more than well, actually. She had gone back to school, finished the degree she had abandoned when she got married, graduated with honors, found a better job, one that used her brain instead of just her hands, at a firm where her boss saw her potential and was helping her grow. She had reconciled with her parents, visited them every few months, called them every week, rebuilt the relationship that Daniel had worked so hard to destroy. Her mother said it was like getting her daughter back from the dead. Her father said he would spend the rest of his life making up for the years they had lost. She started dating again, carefully, slowly. A man she met at a volunteer event who treated her the way she deserved to be treated. His name was Marcus, and he was patient and kind and understood that she was still healing, that there were parts of her that would always carry scars. He did not try to fix her. He just loved her exactly as she was. She called Vincent every few months just to check in, just to remind him that he had mattered, that the decision he had made on that frozen road, the choice to stop instead of driving past, had rippled outward in ways he could not have imagined. One day, she called with news that made him cry. She was engaged to Marcus, the patient, kind man who treated her right. And she wanted Vincent to walk her down the aisle. Her father had passed away the previous year. she explained. A heart attack, sudden and unexpected. She had been there at the end, holding his hand, telling him she loved him. He had died knowing his daughter was safe and happy, and that was a gift she could never repay. And she had no brothers, no uncles, no one else who fit the role. But she had Vincent, the man who had stopped on a frozen road and refused to let her die. The man who had shown her that kindness still existed in the world, that strangers could become family, that the worst moment of her life could become the first step towards something better. Would he do it? She asked. Would he walk her down the aisle and give her away to the man she loved? Vincent could not speak for a long moment. The lump in his throat was too big, the tears in his eyes too thick. When he finally found his voice, he said yes. The wedding was on a spring afternoon, 3 years and 4 months after the night in the snow. Elena wore white, simple and elegant, nothing extravagant, exactly right for who she had become. Her groom waited at the altar, nervous and happy, surrounded by friends and family who had watched him fall in love with a woman strong enough to survive anything. And beside Elena, in a suit he had not worn since his own daughter's wedding, stood Vincent Callahan. They walked down the aisle together, her hand on his arm, both of them crying and not caring who saw. The guests watched in silence, some of them knowing the story, and some of them not. All of them feeling the weight of the moment. At the altar, Vincent kissed her cheek and placed her hand in her groom's. He did not need to say anything. Everything that mattered had already been said, or would never need to be said, because it lived in the space between them where words could not reach. He took his seat next to Maria, who was crying too, and watched Elena marry the man who would spend the rest of his life treating her the way she deserved. And when it was over, when the vows were spoken, and the rings exchanged, and the bride and groom walked back down the aisle as husband and wife, Vincent felt something settle in his chest. Peace. The kind that comes from knowing you made a difference. The kind that comes from a single decision, made in a split second on a frozen road, that changed the course of 2 lives forever. Thank you for watching this story about a biker who saw a woman barefoot in the snow and made one call that changed everything. It was inspired by the countless people who have been saved by strangers who noticed, who stopped, who refused to look away. If you or someone you know is in a dangerous situation, help is available. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-799-7233, or you can text START to 88788. You are not alone. There are people who will stop. There are people who will help you find your way to safety. Subscribe to Gentle Wheels. Hit that hype button to boost this video. And if you want to support what we do, the membership link is below. Share this with everyone who needs to remember that sometimes the most important thing you can do is pay attention to the person no one else sees. Vincent Callahan is 63 years old now. He still works at the shelter's transitional housing program. Still rides his Indian chief on sunny days. Still plays cards with Ray on Thursday nights. Maria says he will probably keep going until they have to carry him out. And she is probably right. Elena has a daughter now, a 2-year-old with her mother's dark hair and her father's easy smile. They named her Catherine, after the nun who ran the shelter that saved Elena's life. And every year, on the anniversary of the night in the snow, Elena brings her family to visit Vincent and Maria. They have dinner together, the 5 of them, and they tell the story of how they became a family. It always starts the same way. She was barefoot in the snow, Elena says, and he stopped. And that, Vincent always adds, made all the difference.